the world depends on you for a response. That the difference between a person being free and continuing to be a slave depends on your response. The urgency of a person being alive or dying a slave depends on your response. You might think and lead your congregation a little differently.
Hey, before we jump into this video, I just want to say thanks for checking us out. We at the Canadian Church Leaders Network exist to see a hopeful future for the church in Canada by serving, connecting, and resourcing pastors. And so if you're a church leader in Canada and you could benefit from more resources or connecting with other leaders across the country, check out our website at ccln.ca, follow us on Instagram at Church Leaders Network, or hit subscribe below. Thanks again, and I hope this video is helpful and encouraging.
Well, Anu, it is really, really special to have this opportunity to connect. I've heard so much about you, and now I get to chat with you. So thanks for making time to chat with myself and all the listeners today.
The joy and pleasure is mine. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
The work of IJM is really well known. I've been following the work of International Justice Mission for a long time, and I'm curious how you found your story connected with the work of IJM, like how you became part of their team and involved, and how that aligns with your heart and passion. So I just love to jump into a bit of your story and how you found yourself in the role you have today.
Absolutely. It's a long and winding story.
Tell me the long and winding story. We're not in a rush at all. I'll take all of it.
The first time I actually saw violence happen in front of me, I mean, I grew up in a very different kind of a setting. My father was a great feminist. He was amazing. My mother, she was the first feminist that I know. So we grew up, three of us grew up in a household which was really equal. And I know it seems like, oh, that's most households. Not in India, not where I was born. But as I was growing up, what I was seeing outside of the comfort of my home was a ton of violence, a ton of patriarchy, things that were okay, like drunken husbands would come and beat up their wives. They would do it unapologetically. If the police comes, they will not interfere because it's a family matter. It was very much part of the custom, part of the culture. And I used to ask these questions, like, why is that okay? I mean, why? Why does she get beaten always? And then she would go back into that same house and she would continue to live that life. There were no repercussions for the perpetrator. And as I was growing up, and because of my love for street theater, I kind of found a way to express my disregard for a culture that validated this, a culture that was okay with this, by performing. I used to go to the slum near my home and perform street theater and invite people into understanding what is okay. Because I thought the reason why violence was accepted was because people didn't know better. They were not educated. Most of them were illiterate. I thought the solution to ending this problem, the solution to having equality in the society, was if everyone went to school. So my street theater performances were all about getting children excited about going to school. Fast forward, my life took a very interesting turn. I was 13 when I started calling out injustices happening in my society. It could be bringing water to my community. It could be bringing, challenging roadblocks, and I would go to the district administration as a young kid and say, write letters to the editor and demand for equity within the society. Went on, became a lawyer, continued my street theater, started a business because I needed to raise revenue for all of these practices. And it went down okay till I first encountered violence. I was 23. And you can kind of imagine the irony of this all. Here I am, having worked with a lot of women, a lot of women by then, talking about how they can walk away from a violent situation, how they can empower themselves, how they can stand on their own 2 feet with their business and all of those things. And when I experienced violence, I was a lawyer by then. I was an MBA graduate by then. I was in the senior most position. I was heading a law school by then. I had all of these things going on. But when violence stared at my face, I didn't know what to do. I ran. I ran from one city to another, only to be attacked again by those who did not enjoy the work that I was doing with the slum children there. Beaten up to a point where I was almost paralyzed. My entire left was, for almost a year. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I mean, if I tried to, my entire left was debilitated to a point where I was extremely dependent on people. And lying down like that, staring at the ceiling, for someone who used to be a marathon runner, for someone who used to be so active, for someone who had it all figured out at a very young age, to stay in that way, completely helpless, was not just humbling, but brought me so close to God, like really close to God. And oftentimes when people share, oh, Anu, I don't know what to do. Things are so bad. I'm like, just wait. I actually look forward for things to get really bad, because that's when I've encountered Christ up so close. That was my season of hanging out with Jesus. That was my season of completely relying, because there's nothing else I could do. And I say this, I've said this before, but for a woman to be incapacitated like that is probably a lot more harder, because you depend on people for things that you'd be so embarrassed to depend on. It's just is really hard to even explain. Anyway, so that season, then my path to recovery, I was invited back to Canada. I was kind of at a crossroads in my life when, somebody that I know who was reporting to me sent me this link to IJM. I got curious. I already had a cushy opportunity here in Canada. This was a decade ago. I also had an opportunity back in India that I was managing. I was VP of an organization, but she sent me this link, and I was still processing what happened to me and what I wanted to do with that information. I was praying every single day for, because you can't make sense of why this happened to you and what you do with this experience, right? And you're still dealing with triggers and whatnot. Saw the link, and the first thing that happened to me was shock. It's like, wait, this was happening in my backyard. Slavery exists, and it's been happening in my backyard for all these years. And I thought I was so conscious about all of these issues. I was so vocal about all of these problems, but this I didn't know existed. And then I got curious. I clicked and Gary. Gary happened. I recall watching that video, falling down on my knees, crying for the next several hours, because I knew exactly what God wanted me to do.
Wow.
I knew exactly where God wanted me to walk towards, but I was not half the person that I used to be before my attack. I was not a good enough lawyer. I was not a good enough, speaker. I was not a good enough writer. I was not a good enough anything. But I had this invitation in front of me, because the way Gary articulated the theory of change about how the problem of violence is the root, be it solving the problem or being the start of the problem. And that was exactly my experience. And And I was like, I want in. I mean, there is a long story to how I managed to be part of the team, but I desperately worked for a year and a half for the organization to give me a chance, to give me an interview. I quit everything that I had here in Canada, went back, took a plane back to India and said, interview me. You know, this is not a plan B. This is my plan. This is everything that God has invited me to. I would do anything to serve the mission. I mean, you can't pay me. It's okay. I want to serve. And this is when my medical debts were up to 1.5 crore in Indian revenue. I was like, it's okay. Can I pay the organization so that I can do this work? I mean, I was desperate. I was desperate to get into the organization because I believe in the mission.
Wow.
It is, it is. And like you, in the earlier conversation that you have, you know, we have a clear plan for how justice can be sought for those who do not have access to justice. And I've seen it in the last decade, Jason. I mean, I've seen exactly how the shift has happened from people in power in the criminal justice system denying that the problem exists to actually being part of the solution, saying that, you know, countries do not have this problem anymore, to walking forward and say, oh my goodness, by 2030, we need to not just rescue this many people, but also rehabilitate, restore, ensure that the perpetrators are held accountable. So I've seen that transformation, and I all glory to God. I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that I have this backstory, because it has very much defined my present and what I get to do with Jesus.
I wanted to ask you about fear and courage, because when you experience the kind of pushback you did, or even if you don't experience that degree of pushback, but when you're trying to do what is right, and then you experience people like hate what you're doing or push against, like that can bring so much fear. And then for that to be coupled with real violence, I'd love to hear how you found the courage to get up again and do it, to put yourself in that position. Because I think maybe some people wouldn't want me to over spiritualize it, but I mean, the enemy's plan is always fear. Man, if I can just make people who are called afraid, I can derail them. And I'd just love to hear how you've journeyed with this relationship between fear and courage as you say yes to brave things in Jesus' name.
I mean, it is not that I don't fear. I mean, there is no, and this is something I've always believed in. Courage is not the absence of fear. So I still have triggers. I mean, there are times when certain stories come in. I mean, I freeze for some time because I'm processing all that happened to me. But again, one thing that I've learned through the years that I've had the opportunity to serve at IJM, but even before that, is that fear does not come from God. So every time I feel that chill go down my spine, and that's often when you're in the field, when you're doing this difficult work of justice, you experience that every single rescue operation. You don't know if you're going to be able to make it back home that night. But the response to that comes also from a different fear that I've experienced, because I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. And fearing that fear of being there introduces a different kind of courage that can only come from God. Because that space of being helpless and vulnerable, and, you know, I mean, I can't even explain on a waterbed, kind of takes your pain away. And then you start putting yourself in the shoes of another who has never had anyone show up for them ever. And these are people who, and I hate to say, do not have a voice, but these are people who are never heard. to a point where they don't have a statement to make. And I always recall, a certain rescue that I went on. I mean, this woman, we asked her so many questions. We knew something was going on. We kept asking her questions. But years of being oppressed, years of being silenced had kind of taken away her capacity to speak, to express what injustice has been. She removed her clothes to show the violence that was meant to her. Never happens in my culture. And that is the extent of how much the spirit has been taken away from the body, and the body is left to serve the master. So having seen that, I mean, I feel there is no room for fear. There is only space for prayer. There is only space for stepping into the unknown, knowing fully well that you cannot lead by your own strength, that you cannot thrive by your own strength. It always, always, always is in partnership with God. And I mean, rescue after rescue, Jason, I think my team and I often joke about it. We have never been this close to God, if not for this kind of work.
Right.
We never, I mean, when you've got nothing to lose, the only person you can turn to is your Savior. And that's what you do every single time you go into the field, despite the attacks, despite the threats. I mean, we've had mobs challenge again and again, threatening they'll come with all of their arms and ammunition, and you're a small team. I mean, there are hundreds of them, and you're standing up against all things evil. You know that. You're seeing Satan stare into your eyes. What else can you depend on? On your courage? No, you just depend on God. And yeah, that's what sailed us through.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. I'd love just super practically, I want to jump back into your story in a bit, but really practically, can you just give a snapshot of the work that IJM is doing? I'm just thinking you're talking about a team and, doing a raid or whatever it might be. Maybe just give a bit of a picture of the type of like on the ground work IJM does. I mean, literally rescuing people who are in slavery. To give us a window into some of the activities that happen on the ground where IJM is present.
Yeah. International Justice Mission, we are a global organization that protects people in poverty from violence. And we partner with local authorities in almost 24 program offices in 14 countries and combat human trafficking, modern slavery, and violence against women and children. And we work in two ways. One, rescuing individual people from situations of exploitation. And what we've also found is that to create long-term sustainable change, justice systems have to enforce laws against these crimes and hold perpetrators accountable for their abuse. And that way, stop the cycle of violence and deter others from abusing vulnerable people. And both aspects of our work are important. So the team's responsibility has been to step into, be in between the perpetrator and the victim, and not just physically extract them in partnership with the government, because remember, we don't want to be that organization which is indispensable. Our success indicator is being able to step out of a country after saying work done, because the system has taken over. We don't want to be that, now we are that INGO, we're coming in, we know how to fix your problem. No. We do that in partnership, not just with the government, but also with grassroots organizations. I mean, people who are the sons and daughters of the soil, who, have their ears to the ground and care deeply about this, because they, like me, have experienced violence, injustice at some point of their life or the other. So that partnership has really made the work of justice infectious. In a way, the hope is to get that to a point where justice is unstoppable and it flows like a river, and everyone can experience that. That's a brief intro into the work of
I
IJM.
appreciate that. When I hear you say the word partnership, even when we were chatting before, you talked about partners in other countries. That word, like, you like twinkle when you say the word partnership. That word means a lot to you. Can you just give us a window into why that word means so much to you? It's got to be an operating mode for you.
Yeah.
I just love to hear your heart behind that.
To begin with, it's very biblical. I mean, the size of the problem of slavery is 40 million vulnerable people are being trafficked, and 1 in 4 are children. That's more than the entire population of Canada. And if you can imagine, that number is hard to comprehend. But
yeah,
to my time in working with our frontline teams in India and leading over 10,000 people into freedom, that statistic becomes someone's story and a life worthy of freedom. It's not a number. It is not a number. These are individuals, real people with real stories of and expectations and hope. Now, imagine if we were to approach this problem as an individual organization or entities that wants to make a difference. 40 million, big number. But this is historically probably the highest number of slaves that the world has witnessed. And to tackle this, the only way we can get through is through partnership. Imagine if an hour of your time is translated into 10,000 hours. Imagine more than one pair of eyes. You have like a million pairs of eyes watching into where this injustice can happen. And we have a clear approach. I mean, like an absolute solution to the problem. We have seen the work. This theory of change works. And the way we can get it out there is by multiplying the impact. Now, I mean, think of it this way. I mean, none of this work, the best of missionaries have stepped out of the world and taken the good word through partnership. It's so biblical. None of us own these solutions. We can do this as we come together, build these communities, work in partnership, and they go. It's kind of like a hub and spoke model. You just see how, one partner sees what is possible and they come together. We have meetings where partners from across the wherever we are working come together in a room and talk about what works for them, what doesn't work for them. They go back to the field, taking these best practices, and then it just keeps getting better and better and better. So if there is a problem happening in one end of this gigantic country, there is another partner at the other end saying, hey, you know what? That victim is traveling by train to this region. Don't worry. We are sending our people there. And it kind of works. It's almost like watching a movie. I get so excited as to how these amazing heroes get activated on the field. They are fueled by the desire to see those who are vulnerable free and experiencing and tasting freedom. Yeah, so the only solution, I think, not just to addressing injustice, anything, is by coming together, inviting people to the table and trusting and letting them do what they need to be doing, honoring God. So, so partnership really brings me alive because, it is biblical and it is working and it is just, it is the path that IJM is on.
So Anu, you were in Canada, you moved back to India to join the team at IJM, and now you're back in Canada. Can you talk about that journey?
Oh my gosh. God has this terrific sense of humor. Like sometimes I think about it and I'm like, I have no idea what you're doing with me, God. So when I was recovering, I mean, this was the time where I told you, right? I mean, I was still figuring out how to walk after this attack happened. And I'm relearning English at that point. And that was the time the Jean Sauvé Foundation invited me to come to Canada. And, it was a fellowship. So I came as a guest. I was here for a year, teaching at McGill and learning at McGill and understanding the best practices and also learning about Canada. If I did not have this exposure to Canada a decade ago, a decade after, this move would have been practically impossible. And I'll tell you why. That time that I, was gifted Honestly, it was a gift where nobody had a sense of who Anu George was before the attack. There was no judgment when I was in a room, when I was stammering, when I was, slowly figuring out to have conversations. There was zero judgment because they're like, oh yeah, she's from another culture. It's fine. And that's fantastic about Canada. I would not have understood what a great country this is. A country that cares about, and this is, I'm not lifting a stereotype. Truth be told, these are the nicest people. But a country that deeply cares about its response to the world's problems. And what I was exposed to, whether it was in university, whether it was outside, whether it was in the political space, everyone cared about everything that a lot of countries don't even talk or think about. And I was really amazed. I was like, hey, I can't believe that you have a 3-hour seminar with leaders from all the parties in that room talking about, adding an additional step in your public transportation. I'm like, who does that? Which country does that? And from one issue to another, I was just exposed to, the magnanimity of a nation that cared deeply about things many don't care about. That happened, and I went back. I was so delighted to be able to be back in the field, do what I was called to do. And then again, God brought this to me. And like every other time, I questioned, I challenged, I pushed back, I refused, because I knew that if God has called you, he should call you to a difficult work. That was my understanding of, what God wanted to do with my life. I was like, no, God, I mean, if you're sending me to Canada, it just doesn't make sense, because you want me to do the difficult work, and the difficult work is in the field. It is the pain, sweat, fear, and everyday challenges of, witnessing violence. What would I do in Canada? How would I fit in? But this kept coming back. And there was this time when my team had to make a decision saying, Anu, it's either this rescue or this, a budget. And it just shook me, because here I am thinking that the work of justice can only be done sitting in the field. And that's where my response is going to matter. But it was deeper than that. And it took me time. It really took me a lot of time to process how significant it is for people in developed countries to partner and walk along, so that we can find ways to not just bring resources, but also bring an understanding of how decisions that are made here can impact lives of those across the world. So I was 8 months pregnant when I boarded the flight with my twins, when I boarded that plane and came to Canada, nervous, not really sure, what God was doing. But again, like every other time, I mean, I underestimated what I thought I was doing back in India. This is hard, Jason. Being in a developed country, far from the field, with this crazy sense of urgency and not having enough opportunity to go out there and invite people into this work of justice. Struggled a lot more in the last 2 years than I have in the field, where I used to work 20 hours back to back, 30 days a month on the field, just traveling, barely getting any sleep. Versus now, I think I've struggled a lot more now. But like I told you, God has a very interesting sense of humor, and he has a way of planting us. And I am getting comfortable being uncomfortable. When I kind of figure this out, he's going to push me to another place to build and grow his kingdom. I know. I mean, this is how God has been working in my life. Yeah. So that's how I came here. It was, and my husband, he quit his job so that I can further on the mission. I took my twins to work after 3 months. They would come with me. They would sit in meetings every 2 hours. I would feed them, come back in. And The organization went through a whole lot of change at that point, but God was in the midst of it all. We moved the organization. There was a restructure. And in the midst of COVID, you would imagine that, it is going to impact, financially how the organization can do. But no, God showed up again. God's people showed up again. There's never been scarcity in God's kingdom. And I've been witnessing that in the last 2 years. So very interesting shift, personally and professionally, but very much aligned to what he's doing.
What do you think the church in Canada's part to play is in this conversation?
Such a significant role. I mean, at IJM, we are inspired by our Christian faith and God's call to seek justice for people in oppression. And that is why we show up to work every day. God's word calls us to seek justice and defend the oppressed. But for many, that can feel overwhelming. And how do we live out of faith that way? I mean, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. So for pastors who are listening to this podcast, I mean, consider if coming alongside IJM to host a Freedom Sunday with your church, or alongside IJM to partner in this work. And Freedom Sunday is an opportunity for the entire church family to deepen their understanding of God's heart for justice, discover the realities of modern slavery, and join the fight to end it. And I'd be so grateful for pastors who represent congregations all over Canada to join in over 15,000 churches around the world, who have used their voice to stand up for justice. And there are ways that you can stand up for justice. You can go online and get step-by-step planning guides, sermon tools, and a variety of free resources for adults and children. But my response to churches in Canada is this. For a lot of churches around the world, to be a Christian means you're putting your life on the line. Depending on which country, you hide if you have to pray together as a community. To be a Christian means risking your life. To be a church means putting your people at risk. We take a ton of things for granted. The freedom that we have to come together as a congregation, the freedom that we have to practice and walk our faith is not available to a ton of Christians around the world. There are specific countries where you're being persecuted for living out your faith. So what we have right here in Canada is the gift. And oftentimes I invite people into the space of thinking, are we receiving that gift well? And are we using that opportunity to bless others with the gift and the freedom that we have? Well, so it is a big role, Jason. I mean, churches have responded to injustice around the world several times, time and again. Reforms have happened in countries where we thought that reforms would never happen. So many issues that I can think about. Female infanticide was questioned. Sati as a system, where bride burning was a practice in my part of the world. There were Christian leaders who challenged that. And those things which would have continued to be a part of the norm are not anymore. So there is a significant role that the church has to play.
I think it can be overwhelming for pastors right now to go, we know that there's a biblical call to justice. You just can't get through the New Testament, Old Testament for that matter, and not just see God's passionate heart for the oppressed and real justice. And what I'm thankful for about even this conversation is I'm looking for myself. I'm a pastor of a church here in Vancouver, and I'm looking for my friends, just we need to fight the proclivity to find ourselves almost in a paralysis, because there's so much to say, hey, I'm going to refuse to do nothing. I'm going to refuse for my people to do nothing. And then my hopeful conviction is that the church could build a bridge to people who are far from God through the work of justice. what would it look like for a pastor, not just to like partner with IJM, but to even just begin their own journey of exploring God's heart for justice, and then thinking about how do you lead a church towards that? Maybe whether that's something you've seen or just some reflections on that.
I was in Scotland briefly, almost 5 years ago, when really my leader said, you need to take a break because you need time with Jesus. And there I encountered this pastor, Reverend John, and he was never exposed to this problem of injustice. He saw me come into his church and he was like, hey, you're new. Where are you from? Got interested in the work that I was doing, and took it upon himself to pray for me and, start working with me. I mean, working with me as in talk through things that I was struggling with spiritually. I still stay in touch with him. It's been 6 years. And I've requested that he always sends me his weekly sermons, so that I also get to, experience and receive that blessing. His way of leading the church has significantly changed after that encounter he had with me. He has, every single sermon that he has been leading his congregation with had an aspect of justice and an invitation to respond to it. And I was amazed. Think of this, Sunday after Sunday, 6 years, to talk only about something that, and what amazed me even further was that it didn't matter which verse he was picking it from. He always drove it to God's heart for justice. And that got me thinking, if pastors were waiting for a movement to join in, that's one thing. But if pastors can be the movement that the world needs, it's another thing. And honestly, I keep saying this, there's absolutely no scarcity in God's kingdom. God knows how he wants to lead, and he will continue to lead in his supreme sovereign self. The invitation that I have for pastors would be to partner with us in a way where it's not like just signing a check and giving. It is beyond that. It is praying for us. And I can tell you, there was some rescue operations where we could not have come out alive if not for prayers. And I know it was an impossible situation, not once, not twice, so many examples when we just like, we have no idea. We report back to the team. The team immediately activates the, church, the prayer partners in less than half an hour, or exactly before the problem can blow over. We've seen God's miracle. So we are sustained by these prayers. And I think if as a leader of a church, that the world depends on you for a response, that the difference between a person being free and continuing to be a slave depends on your response. The urgency of a person being alive or dying a slave depends on your response. You might think and lead your congregation a little differently.
Anu, last question. What's on your heart for IJM in Canada as you look at the years ahead? What are you dreaming, hoping, praying, planning towards?
These are my twins, Tamara and
so
Eva.
Sweet.
They turned 2 in May. The day they were born, I made a promise to them. I said that I will ensure that I would do everything in my power to see slavery become history, and that in their lifetime, they would be able to talk about how there was a time injustice was in, and how Christians came together, banded together, and won over evil. So when I think of the work of IJM Canada, the vision is clear the vision is clear to rescue 500 million and protect billions from slavery. We'll get there. Absolutely. It is an invitation that each of us have, and we just have this gift that we choose to receive or just ignore. It is a gift from God, an opportunity to show up in a time like this. I mean, imagine how many of us, had we been alive during the season of Holocaust, look back at that time and say, why did I not do something? Here is an opportunity yet again for us as Christians to show up and band together as a community of those who love God and his creation and all of those who are created in his image. Here is an opportunity for us to respond. So I want, and I dream and desire of a day where my team in Canada can celebrate and say, hey, we as a nation led a fight against this problem and had a response for this globally. Because of which history it's written.
Thanks so much for watching. Before you click to your next video, we want to let you know about a few things we're doing at CCLN that might serve you. First, we've got a bi-weekly podcast featuring conversations with incredible church leaders in Canada and around the world. Just search up the Canadian Church Leaders Podcast on wherever you listen to your podcasts. Secondly, every month our team works hard to put together an email newsletter of curated resources and content for pastoral ministry in Canada. So if you want to receive that in your inbox, you can sign up on our website at ccln.ca. Third, this fall, we're starting the Church Leaders Incubator, which is a 2-year program created for young pastors to strengthen their character and ministry for long-term effective senior leadership in their church. And so if you want to learn more about that program, you can just check it out at ccln.ca/incubator. And lastly, we exist because of the generous donations of people and churches partnering with us in our mission to lift up and serve pastors across Canada. If you're interested in joining our mission financially, we'd love you to consider making a one-time or regular donation. And you can do that at ccln.ca/partner. Okay, that's it from me. Hope you know that we love you and are cheering you on. We'll see you next time.